Hello and welcome to Azure Policies, how to control and audit what is happening in Microsoft Azure. My name is David Postlethwaite. I work for a financial services company called Banking Circle based in Copenhagen. Now, I've been working as both a SQL Server and an Oracle DBA for well over 15 years. But for the last 3 years, I've also become an Azure administrator along with DevOps, admin, Power BI, admin, working on automation and auditing, and especially the guy that tries to push for standards on our systems. Now, here's a question for you. How well do you know your Azure estate? Do you know if all your resources are in the correct data center? Can you prove to your auditors that you aren't breaking GDPR regulations? Do you know if all the auditing and security settings have been applied to your resources? Do you know if which resources are exposed to the internet? So many questions that your auditors love to throw at you. In the old days, in our on-premises data centers, it was quite easy for us to control how things were built. There were probably only a few of us who had the privileges to install new hardware and build new systems, so you could control how it was done. But in the cloud, it's much more difficult to control. We now have self-service build, and I suspect there are many people who can deploy anything from anywhere without much regard to standards, and your estate can soon get out of control. Even if you're using scripting tools like Terraform, there are still no checks in Azure that the scripts conform to your rules. So what can you do to try and rein this in and force people to follow the rules? Prove to the auditors that all your databases meet your standards. Well, earlier this year I was asked to take a look at Azure Policies for enforcing tags on all our resources. And in the process of learning how to manage tags, I learned a whole load more about what Azure Policies can do. And this presentation is the result. So let's take a step back. When we want to create a resource in Azure, we either go to the portal or use some sort of scripting tool like PowerShell or Terraform to initiate the creation of the resource. In our example, we want to build a SQL database. We enter the information about the resources, such as the data center we want to put it in, the SKU or the power level we want it to have. Maybe we'd like to add a tag such as environment, so we know whether it's production or development or UAT. Once we've filled in the information, we either click Go in the portal or we start our script. Now, first of all, Azure will check if it has all the information it needs to build the resource, such as a missing parameter or incorrect value in your PowerShell script. It'll also check things like, is the resource you want to build actually available in the region requested? All the things necessary to build your resource. Next, it will check if you have permissions to create the object. And if everything is okay, it will go ahead and it will create your database. Azure doesn't care if you accidentally choose Asia instead of Europe, or if you choose a power level that's too large or too small, or if you miss the tag information, or if you've misspelled production, or if you haven't enabled Defender or set up backups and the like. It just goes, okay, I have all the information I need, I'll get on and I'll build the database for you. But what can we do if we want to ensure our database is built in North Europe? It's always got a SKU of business critical. The environment is from a standard list of names and so on. And this is what our policies can do. They can add an extra layer of defense to your build process. When you go to build or change a resource, Azure will check for any policies that are assigned to your subscription or that resource group. So if there is a rule that says resources can only be deployed in North Europe if the location is North Europe, then Azure will allow the process to continue. But if it's not, then it will stop it. Similarly, if the SKU isn't business critical, then it will stop the process. Or if the tag called environment is missing, or if that tag doesn't have a value from the defined list, then again it will stop it. And if any of these rules fail, then Azure won't build your database. And this is what policies can give you. Once you've defined your policy rules, you can use them to deny creation of new resources or just audit your current estate to see what existing resources don't meet your policy rules. Even fix resources in some cases that don't meet the rules. That gives you an idea of what policies can do. Let's look at how it works. So there are three components in Azure Policies, and this can sometimes make it a bit difficult to get the hang of when you first start looking at it. First of all, we have policy definitions, and this is the policy rule. The definition contains all the details of the condition you want to check. This can be very specific, such as the policy auditing on SQL servers should be enabled, or they can be more generic, such as require a tag on a resource group, or inherit a tag and its value from a resource group, or allowed locations for resources. In this case, we aren't defining the tag name or the location that we want to enforce. This is done later. It also defines what happens if the condition is not met, such as deny or audit. It's written in JSON, our favorite language. Much more details in a moment. Secondly, we have assignments. And here we take one of our policy definitions and we assign it to a resource. This could be one resource group, or your whole subscription, or multiple subscriptions in one go. The assignment is also where you define the values that the definition will use. For instance, take the definition called require a tag on a resource group. The definition doesn't state which tag name we want to enforce. This is done at the assignment. Similarly, for the definition called allowed locations, the definition doesn't state the locations you want to use. This is done in the assignment. And this gives us great flexibility so we can use the same definitions over and over again in different assignments. You could also add exclusions, so you can assign your policy to the whole subscription, but exclude one or more resource groups that shouldn't have those restrictions. Maybe they're ones specifically signed for emergency testing. Finally, we have initiatives, and here we can group several definitions into one group or initiative so that the definitions are applied as one set. And this generally seems to be the best way to apply policies. Now, a bit more on definition. Microsoft supplies hundreds of built-in predefined definitions in Azure that cover most of the things you'll ever want to monitor or control. But you can also write your own custom definition either from scratch or by copying one of the predefined definitions as a starting point. You can do more than just deny the creation of resource. There are a number of different effects. So we have disabled. It's turned off, but it will still audit even when it's disabled. We have append, so we can append missing information or fields to the resource, like appending a tag from a resource group to your new resource. Modify an existing deployment to fit the rules specified. And again, we can use this on things like tags. Deny, we've already talked about that. Stop the creation of something if the configuration is missing or the configuration is not allowed by your standard. We also have audit, where we can actually audit what is compliant and what is not compliant. Audit if not exists, more or less the same thing. We also have something called deploy if not exists, and this is where you can deploy something to your resource that is missing. So the policy can see that something is missing, and it will then go and add the missing component. You need to create a template to do this. It's quite complex. I haven't tried it myself, but it is there if you wish to do it. We have two modes, one called all and one called indexed. Don't worry too much about this. You'll just see it in the code, and it's worth understanding that there are two there. An important point at the bottom, it can take 30 minutes or longer for a changed policy to actually come into effect. And this can make debugging quite difficult because you don't know whether your policy has started working or whether there is an error in your policy which is stopping it from working. So do watch out for that. It also makes doing demos like this quite tricky because we don't want to all wait for 30 minutes for the new policy to take effect. Right, that's enough theory. Time for a demo. Right, here we are in my Azure subscription, and before we go to look at policies, let me just give a mention to management groups. I came across management groups when I was working with policies. Basically, it allows you to put your subscriptions into a group. And here I have my two Microsoft subscriptions in the same group. And now I can apply policies to the group, which then get applied to both subscriptions in one go. You can also use this for things like security roles and the like, so you can apply a security role to the group and it will get applied to both subscriptions. So potentially a useful feature, and I've used it in my Azure policies. So let's go back to the screen. I've got policies on here, but if you want to find them under services, you need to scroll right down towards the bottom to the one called management, and here we have policy, and here's the management groups we just talked about. So let's click on policy. So the most useful screen is actually compliance, so let me go and click on compliance, and here we can see all the policies that I have assigned and how compliant they are. So let me pull this out a bit so we can see the names of the policies. Up here is a little graph that shows you that, not surprisingly, most of mine are non-compliant and there are very few that are compliant so far. So if we choose one of these policies, auditing on SQL Server should be enabled. If I click on this one, we can drill down, and now we can actually see the servers that aren't compliant. We can then change again and we can see the compliant ones. Here we have one compliant. So this is a really useful feature for looking at which services are not compliant. And from here we can click on details and we can see various pieces of information, some useful, some not, about the reasons why a particular server is not compliant. After compliance, we also have one called remediation, and this is where we can use the deploy if not exists function to actually fix resources that do not meet our standard, apply changes to them using templates, but we're not covering that on here. There's also an option called events where you can actually apply webhooks that get fired when a resource changes from compliant to non-compliant, or the other way around. Maybe you want it to fire an email or do something like that when something changes. Here I am in the Microsoft Azure portal. Now, before we go into policies, let me just give a quick mention to management groups. I came across management groups when I was first looking at policies. And management groups allow you to put your subscriptions into a group, and then we can apply the policies to the management group, and they will automatically be applied to all the subscriptions within that group. You can also use management groups for things like security. I was recently asked to allow someone to see the costs of our subscriptions, and rather than adding them to the role in each subscription, I simply added them into the role in the management group, and then they could see the costs of all the subscriptions beneath that. So I do recommend that you give them a look if you haven't come across them before. So let's have a look at policies. I obviously have them already up here, but if you want to find them, if we click on more services, scroll on down to management and governance, and here we have policies, and we also have our management groups here as well. So let me click on policies. Now I'm going to go straight to the compliance screen because that's the bit we're really interested in. And here we have a list of all the policies which are currently active. We can see their compliance state, and we can also see how compliant or not compliant they actually are. We can also drill down into one of our policies. If we take this one, auditing on SQL Server should be enabled, we can click on this, and it will show us which SQL servers are not compliant, and we can also click on the compliant list and see the one which is compliant. So this gives us the ability to quickly see what in each policy is compliant or not compliant. When we have our non-compliant list, we can click on details, and again we get some information about why it's not compliant. Not particularly handy. We can see the non-compliance message here, so auditing should be enabled. And the reason for non-compliance is simply current value must be equal to the target value. So Some useful information, some not useful. The main screen to look at is here, where you can see what is compliant and what isn't. Under compliance, we have remediation. We're not using remediation today. This is where we can use the deploy if not exists function to actually apply changes to resources that don't meet our policies. We also have something called events, where we can create webhooks that will be fired if a resource goes from compliant to non-compliant, or vice versa. Maybe you want to receive emails when resources get changed in that way. Again, we're not going to look at that today. It's way beyond the scope of this particular talk. So let's have a look at some of our definitions. And here's the list of definitions that I have created. So these are the ones that I've created which are under custom. You'll see some of them are located in my management group. Some of them are created straight into the Visual Studio subscription that I have. Below the custom definitions, we have a whole list of built-in definitions. As I said, there are loads and loads and loads of them. If we just have a look at one particular category, as this is a data talk, let's come down to SQL, which is on the list, and let me just show you some of the built-in definitions that we have. Let's go back up the top, open it up a bit. So not only does this cover SQL Server, but it covers Postgres. Private endpoints should be enabled on Postgres. Vulnerability settings for SQL Server should contain an email address. Private endpoints for MariaDB. Transparent data encryption should be enabled. Postgres servers should have customer managed keys. Lots and lots of different definitions here for you. We also have ones here. So configure Azure SQL Server to disable public network access. Here is one that's using that deploy if not exists functionality to actually change the resource to meet our requirements. But you can see there's a huge list of lots and lots of definitions that we can pick up and use and deploy straight away. Now, as well as individual definitions, you remember I also mentioned initiatives. And initiatives is where you can group multiple definitions into one initiative and deploy that in one go. So I have two initiatives which we'll be looking at later, but here are some of the initiatives that are built in. So we have the NIST SP800 initiative that holds 471 different policies. Some of the other initiatives that have been added: audit machines with insecure password security settings. There's 9 there. If we come down here, the NIST Revision 5 has got nearly 1,000 policies. You can deploy them all in one go. There's lots of options here, so if you're involved in the NHS in the UK, then we have one here with 57 policies. Kubernetes cluster security, already defined. Canada's federal PBMM, 57 in that. And one which may be of interest right at the very bottom, if we can get down there, is audit public network access. When we first started using Azure 10 years ago, we nearly always needed to connect via the internet. Now we have VPNs, ExpressRoute, and the like to do it for us. So we should be trying to disable our systems from having direct internet access except where it's really needed. Have you ever checked to see, when people have been creating resources, which ones still have public network access that shouldn't? Well, here is an initiative that will do it for us. And this initiative will audit our public network access. So it will look at everything you could ever think of: app configurations, service environments, automation accounts, batch accounts, Azure data factories, container registries, Postgres SQL servers, MariaDBs, Cosmos, event grids, everything you could think of. You could deploy this, and within an hour or so, you'll know exactly which resources in your subscription still have internet access. And this is the advantage of initiatives, and I think this one could be of a lot of use to people. Once we've built our initiatives or our definitions, then we have to assign them. So here are some of the assignments that I already have in place. And as we've seen, once we have our assignments, they get assigned to either, in my case, I've assigned them to my subscription or direct to the management group, so they get assigned to multiple subscriptions, but we can also assign them to just a particular resource group. And these are the ones that appeared in my compliance list, which showed what is compliant and what isn't. Now, one thing that you will see in every set of policy assignments is an assignment called ASC default subscription and your subscription name, and that will appear in every one of your subscriptions. Now, if I click on this, you'll see that it has in its description, this is the default set of policies monitored by Azure Security Center. So you're using Azure Policies even if you didn't realize. So here is a list of all the things that it's looking for: secret expirations, certificate validity, system updates, and the like. So you will see this. Don't edit it. I think it would let you edit it. This is important. This is used by Azure Security Center. So that's a quick overview. Let's go and create a definition. So I'm going to look for one called location, and we will find down here allowed locations for resource group. We're going to create a definition that will only allow us to create resource groups in certain data centers. So let's use this one here as our starting point. Now I'm actually going to duplicate this and create one from it. Some of the blogs that I've read have suggested that you don't use the definitions that Microsoft provide. You actually make a copy of them, because Microsoft may decide to alter that definition for you and then basically break your policy. So I'm going to duplicate this definition. The first thing I need to do is decide the location I want to put it in. So I'm going to choose, so I have it in the management group. I'm going to choose my subscription. So I'm going to put it into Visual Studio in this case. Select that. Obviously it now needs a name. I'm going to call it Demo. Allowed locations. You can give it a nice description. You can create categories. I'm just going to use the category it's in. And then down here we actually have the definition. This is quite a simple one we're looking at here. So we're in a mode of all. So here is the policy rule. If all of the type is a resource group and the location is not in my list of allowed locations, which is a parameter, then deny the creation of this resource group. And down here we have our parameter, list of allowed locations, which is an array, but you'll see that there are no locations actually listed. We have something here called a strong type, and this is the location strong type. Basically, Microsoft maintain the list of locations for us in this strong type. We do not need to specify them in our parameter list here. Microsoft will provide them for us when we go to assign this policy. And that's all there is to a definition. So let's click Save, and we'll save that. Once you've saved your definition, you do get some extra properties. So you can see here some metadata information. You'll also find it's now showing it back to front, so the parameters are at the top and the policy rule is underneath. At the bottom we do get some more useful information, and here you can actually see who created it, when they created it, when it was created, when it was last modified. So that can be useful if you want to know who has been messing around with one of my definitions. Once we have our definition, we need to assign it. So let's click on Assign. Again, we need to select our scope. We already have Visual Studio Enterprise, but I could from here go and select a resource group. Doesn't make sense in this case because we are actually defining a resource group. Any exclusions, any areas we don't want to put it in, we need to give it a name. I'll leave the assignment name the same. We need to give it a description. Whether we want the actual policy to be enforced or whether we just want it to audit, and who created it, me. Once we've done that, we can go to our parameters, and now you'll see, because of our strong type, we have all the locations that Microsoft support, and we can scroll down and select the ones we want. You'll notice, as well as well-known data centers, we also have something like Europe and France. That's not a data center, is it? Europe does not exist. We have North Europe, we have West Europe. I haven't actually got Europe to work yet. If I select that, I expected to get North Europe and West Europe in the list when I go to create my resource group, but it doesn't seem to work. So if you do manage to get that to work or can explain what these are for, I would love to know. So we're just going to come down here and find North Europe. And West Europe. They're going to be the two places that we are going to allow our resource group to go in. Remediation, we're not doing remediation. This is to do with the deploy if not exists functionality, which we're not using. We do need a non-compliance message, so resource groups must be in Europe. Do remember we've typed that in. Very important, because you'll see a flaw in a moment. Once we've done that, we get to review and create. So let's go and create our assignment. And here is our assignment. It is now active and working. And this is the definition which is used in our assignment. So now we have created our assignment. It is now active. Let's go and create a resource group and let's see what happens. So let's come back over here. Let's go and to resource groups. So let's click on create. And you'll instantly see we've got an error message. Resources always seem to default to East US, but we have an error message. Policy enforcement value does not meet requirements on resource. The value East US in this field was denied. The one thing you're not seeing is that non-compliance message we typed in. It just does not appear. Any user would have to try and guess what that meant, which is a bit of a drawback. But when we select our list, you can see that we can only choose the two data centers that we selected, North Europe or West Europe. When I select North Europe, the error message goes away and everyone's happy. So now we are able to stop people creating resources in the wrong place. I'm not going to carry on and create this because we're going to use this example again in a minute. Now, let's go and look at something slightly more complicated. Let me come over to my other subscription. We're going to look at a definition that I've already created, and we're going to do three things at the same time. Let me show you. So what I've created is a definition that will control the location that we want. We're also going to force a naming standard for our resource groups. And another feature that I've seen Microsoft use is the effect that we want. We're actually going to define that as a parameter as well. Now here's a little bug which I found very difficult. You'll notice that the policy rule takes quite a while to appear. When I first started working on policies, I kept thinking, well, where the heck is the policy? I can't find it. It just didn't appear. So do watch out. Sometimes the policy rule takes a while to appear, and that can be a bit confusing. So let's have a look at this one. So again, we're in the mode of all, and the policy rule is if all of, the type is a resource group, and any of, the location is not in our list of allowed locations. We understand that one. Or the name is not like *-RG. So we're going to enforce all our resource groups to have -RG at the end. Now, I haven't found anything more sophisticated than just a star at the beginning or the end. There may be more sophisticated ways of managing naming conventions, but that's as much as I've seen so far. Then the effect is also a parameter list called effect. So let's scroll down. Now, I've done something slightly different with our list of allowed locations. It's still our strong type of location, but here I've actually defined the values that can be selected in our assignment. The first policy we created, when we came to assign it, we had every single data center in the world, which could cause problems if someone accidentally selects the wrong one. Here we're actually going to limit that list that can be selected to just North Europe, West Europe, UK South, and global. Global is a general term for anything which doesn't fit into a data center, like networking rules and things like that. Going down a bit further, we have the effect. And here we're defining the effect, so we're going to allow either audit, disable, or deny, and the default value of audit. So that is what my definition looks like. Nothing else in here is different to what we've seen before. So let's come back out and let's have a look at the assignment that I have created for this. So here's the location policy. This is the assignment that we have created. And let me just edit the assignment so you can see what it looks like. So again, standard stuff, name, location, description, etc. Then when we go to parameters, we don't see any parameters. We have this option here called only show parameters that need input or review. Well, as far as I'm concerned, all parameters need input and review. So we need to turn that off. And now we can see the locations that we can select from. So I only allowed 4 in the definition, and I'm only going to select North, West, and Global as my choice. And the effect, again, we can choose that. So I'm going to select Deny. We have our non-compliance message, must be in Europe and must be named *-RG. So this is already running. I'm not going to save it, I already built this. So let's go back to my dashboard. Yeah, I don't want to change anything. Let's go back to home. And let's go and create a resource group. So let's click on Create. Select the subscription we want. Let me go and select my region that I want to put this in. And they're all blank. There's no region. It's like, hang on a minute. I chose 3 regions. Why aren't I getting any region? It's all empty. This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. Well, let's put in a resource group name. So let me put a resource group name in. And now I get an error message. Value does not meet requirements on resource. The value is not in the field. No useful error message, as we've seen. But yes, I remember. I need to put -RG at the end. We have this naming convention. So let me do that. What happens? I'm still getting an error message. But hang on again. It's under this resource group name, but I've got the resource group name right. Why is it complaining? This isn't fair. I don't understand. Let me go and select the region, see what's happened there. Now, because I've got the resource group name correct, even though it's displaying an error, I can now select my region from the ones that I allowed, North Europe and West Europe. So I can now select North Europe and the error goes away. See how confusing this could be for an end user who doesn't understand how you've created your definitions and your policies. Which is why I don't recommend using multiple rules in the same definition. You can see it could get very, very messy. Because basically, until both of the rules are correct, the error message won't go away. You're not getting that non-compliance message, so it's not helping to explain what is wrong. Now, one thing I'll also point out while we're here, we are getting this error message very conveniently when we are creating our resource, when we're filling the information in. This is a new feature. After watching this, if you go off and watch some other videos on policies that were made before around about July the 1st, 2022, you'll find that the error messages didn't appear until you clicked Create. Then Azure would check your policies and give you an error message. And when you got the error message, you then had to go back, start creating your resource again. And if you have multiple definitions against your resource group or whatever you were creating, you'd be going backwards and forwards until you had fixed each one. Now at least they have changed it so that the errors appear as you're creating your resource in the portal. So rather than putting multiple rules in one definition, what we recommend is to create an initiative, and that's what I'm going to show you now. Let's come back over to my original subscription. Go back into policies, come down to our definitions, and let's select initiatives. So we're going to look at tags now. Tags is what I spent a lot of time this year working on for my company. So we have an initiative here called Require Tags on a Resource Group. So in our company, we wanted to ensure that every single resource had a tag on it. So if I click on this one, let's have a look at how it works. And I'm going to click on Edit Initiative because it's easier to see how it works in edit mode. So first of all, we have our basic information. Where is it located? What its name? Any description? The category? We even have a version number now. The next stage is to define definitions that we want to use in our initiative. So I've got 3 definitions which I'm using 4 ways. So we've got a definition called require a tag on a resource group, and I'm using that twice. I've also got a definition called append a date on a resource group, and I've got another one, valid list for a resource group. And for each definition you have to give it a reference or an ID. So here I'm giving it a reference which gives an indication of, for me, what it's going to be used for. So this require tag on a resource group is going to be a tag called application. So let me just show you the definition for require tag. We come over here. So let's have a look at the policy rule, which is down the bottom. So if the type is a resource group and the field tag name does not exist, then deny the creation. And the tag name is a parameter, which we've defined here, and we'll define that tag name when we get to the assignment. This means I can use the same definition twice, one to require the tag for a tag called application, and another one to require a tag for created by. Now I have an append version here, so let me click and show you the definition. And in this case we have, if it's a resource group and the tag name, whatever we call that, doesn't exist, then append a new tag with that tag name, and the value will be UTC now, i.e. the current date. Now I've looked at different ways of displaying the date, and the only way I can find to do it in the policy is UTC now, which will just give you the date in year, month, day, and the time format. So I've literally just gone a substring, just take the first 10 characters because I'm only interested in the date, not the time. And again, the tag name is our parameter, so when we come to our assignment, we can tell the assignment which tag name we want to use. So the environment, this is a standard list that you've seen before. So in our definition, we have simply said, if it's a resource group and the tag name is not in our list of allowed values, then deny. And the allowed values we will define in a moment. So that's our different policies. I'm not using groups, so let's go over to initiative parameters. And this initiative parameter is our list of valid environments. So let's click on this, and you can see here I have a list of valid environments. It's a type of array. Here's my allowed environment names, development, disaster recovery, etc. And I put them all as default values. If you don't put anything in, it doesn't like it. It seemed to work best when I put every value in. It may not be the best, but it seemed to work for me. So we have our list of environments that we want to use with our environment tag. Finally, we have policy parameters, and this is where we are defining what our definitions we use. So our tag application is looking for the parameter called tag name, and that's going to be application. The tag name for created by will be created by, creation date, and here we have two, so the tag name for environment is environment, and the tag values will be valid environments. So once we've created our definition, we need to then go and assign it. So let's come over to our assignments. Let's look at our initiative assignments. So required tags on a resource group is the one that we are looking at. Let's just go and edit the assignment. It's easier to see what's going on here. Standard stuff, scope, exclusions, name, description, enabled, etc. Parameters, so we have this problem again, only show parameters that need input. And now we can select which of those environments we want to use for this particular assignment. And in this case, I've selected all of them except for production, because this is a test subscription. Remediation, we're not using that. Non-compliance messages, this gets a lot more interesting. We have a default non-compliance message, but we can now put non-compliance message against each individual definition in our assignment. That is our assignment. We've filled it all in. We have all the values we want. Let's go and create a resource group. Let's see what happens. So let's go back to resource groups. Let's click create. So we're in Visual Studio Enterprise. So I'm going to call my resource group Demo Resource Group. If it's happy, I'm going to select North Europe, because that's where I want to put it. Now the best way I can show the error message for tags is actually to go to Review and Create, and then go back to tags, because that forces it. Suddenly we get some messages which are more useful. Policy enforcement, yeah, da-di-da. The field tag application is required. Fantastic, we're actually getting a useful error message now. So I can now go, oh, well, I better create a tag called application and give it a value. What happens now? The tag created by is required. Oh, okay, I better go and put in created by and me. What do I get now? The tag the tag environment with the value is required. It even gives me my values from my array. Isn't that brilliant? It's now giving me some useful information. So let me go and create my environment and select, in this case, development. And now the error message goes away. Notice there's no error message about creation date, because the creation date is an append tag. What that is doing is if I don't put creation date in, it will create it for me. So I won't put creation date in just so you can see the effect. So now, review, all the error messages go away. Let's click on create and off it will go. That was quick. Let's go to resource group. And here's my resource group. And here are the tags. And there's creation date, 21st September 2022. Simple as that. So we've enforced our tags on our resource group, and where we've missed them, it's added them in for us. So the next stage is, how do we manage resources in our resource group? So let's go back to my policy again, because I have an initiative already created. And we'll have a quick look at this one. Let's just click on initiatives. So require tags on a resource. So what we're going to do now, we want to ensure that our resources also have tags. But we're going to do one extra step. If you forget to put any tags in, we'll inherit them from the resource group. Let me show you. Normal stuff here. Let's go to policies. So here are the definitions I have. Append a date on a resource. We already know how that works. It's exactly the same as before. This is just for resource. But here we have inherit a tag from a resource group. And I'm using this definition 3 times with a reference of application, environment, and created by. We also have our valid list of resources. So when it comes to the environment, we are going to say if the environment tag doesn't exist, then inherit it. If you have put environment in, it must be from my valid list. So let me show you the inherited tag, because that's the one which is different. So let's click on definitions. Let's have a look at the policy rule. So if all of the tag name doesn't exist, but tag name does exist in the resource group, then append the tag and its value from the resource group. And again, the tag name is a parameter, so we'll be defining that. And we're using that one 3 times. We have our append date and our valid list. Again, our initiative parameters will allow us to select our valid environments, which I have done. Same as what we've seen before. Our policy parameters, this is where we now define our tags. So for the definition creation date, we need a tag name. So we have creation date, application, environment, created by environment. So we have 2 for environment, because we have the environment to inherit. We also have the environment if it exists. Does it have a valid name? Okay, so that's standard stuff. Let's come out of definitions, go to assignments. Let's find our initiative, require tags on a resource. Let's have a look at this one. Normal stuff on the basic screen. Parameters again. The parameters, we're now selecting our environments. I have accidentally selected production in this one. We have our non-compliance messages, which we've seen before, though they won't actually appear anywhere, because if the tag doesn't exist, it's going to inherit it anyway. But we have defined them. The only one that could fire is our environment valid names. So let's have a go and create a resource in our resource group. So here's my resource group. Let's create a resource, and I'm going to create a SQL Server brackets logical, simply because this is the one that requires the least amount of input. So let's create a logical SQL Server, and it doesn't cost me any money. So we're putting it into our resource group. We need to give it a name. So demo SQL -01. Is it happy? I always find it funny that the location is in East US, even though the resource group is somewhere completely different. Now we don't have a policy defining the locations for our resources. We should do, obviously. Go North Europe. Right, I need to define a SQL, so SQL admin. Go to networking. We're not too worried about networking because we're not doing anything. No, I don't want that. So now get to tags. This is where we're not getting any error messages because we haven't made a mistake, because if we don't put them in, we're going to inherit them. Let's go on to review and create. No error messages. Let's click create, and let's see what happens. Now while that's creating, let me come over and just show you some information that Microsoft provides. So the logical operators are very limited. All we have is the choice of not, all of, and any of. That's all we can use in our definition. But there are quite a few more conditions that you can use. So equals, not equals, like, not like, contains in, not in. So there's a few more there, but it is quite limited on what you can do. And this is again a good reason to keep each definition separate and then use an initiative to join them together. Right, our deployment is complete. Let's go to our resource. And here we can see that it has inherited our tags from our resource group. So we have application created by creation date and environment. A few more useful features that we haven't had time to cover. There is an add-on to Visual Studio Code for Azure Policies. You may find this a more useful way of editing and managing and saving your policies. It's there if you want it. Personally, I haven't used it yet. I've been working through the portal, but the option is there. Naturally, there is PowerShell available, which allow you to query, add, get, edit all your policies, fairly standard stuff. You can also use Terraform if you like to control all your releases via Terraform. Terraform also supports Azure Policies. There are some limitations. I doubt very much that you'll hit that many limitations, but there is this limitation in what you can do. It's just there for information. So I hope this talk has been useful. Please let me know if it has, and thank you very much for listening.